I'm Tiffany Thompson, 32, a bartender and single mom. My shift ended late. I walked in and saw the boxes, Raven's books, Willow's blankets, piled up like they were ready for a yard sale. Then I heard my mother's voice, cold and sharp, coming from the doorway they had just cleared. Our grandson deserves the best rooms. I saw Raven, 7, and Willow, 5, on the floor, clinging to their displaced belongings. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and became only my children's mother. I looked at my girls and whispered, "Pack your things?" But where would 3 people go with 0 money? Let's rewind a year. My ex-husband didn't just take the house, he took most of the savings and left me with 2 amazing girls, Raven and Willow, and a whole lot of debt. As a single mom working late shifts as a bartender, I had only one safe option when the apartment lease ended, moving back home to Laurelhurst. I convinced myself this was temporary. It was supposed to be a safe harbor, a place where my kids could be stable while I rebuilt my life and saved every possible penny. My parents had the space, the wealth, and the family obligation, or so I thought. The reality of living under their roof was far more toxic than any debt. My new reality, working for strangers, but living as a failure with family. The house was grand, but our space wasn't. We were confined to the cramped back bedrooms, always feeling like intruders. My mother never failed to remind me, "We are doing you a favor, Tiffany. You're a guest. Try to keep your failure quiet." Meanwhile, my brother Gideon was the golden child. Successful lawyer, perfect wife, and now the impending birth of their first grandson, Finn. His presence commanded the entire house, mine was merely tolerated. Every conversation revolved around his career, his potential, his perfect lineage. My girls and I became the house's invisible residents. My efforts as a mother, dismissed. My job as a bartender? Shameful. Every dollar I earned was immediately compared to Gideon's bonus. Their love wasn't a given, it was a performance metric I could never meet. I knew the only way out was up. So I made a silent vow, 18 months. That was my deadline to save enough for a security deposit, first month's rent, and a 6-month safety net. My job as a bartender became my weapon. Every shift was a battle, and every dollar earned was a tiny piece of freedom purchased. I never bought new clothes. I never went out. My diet consisted mainly of coffee, and whatever leftovers I could discreetly pack from the restaurant. Everything went into the lockbox hidden under my mattress. I wasn't saving money, I was saving my children's dignity. Nothing else mattered. Their sleeping faces fueled my 14-hour shifts. This was a necessary endurance test. Every family dinner became a stage for Gideon. My father would raise a glass to Gideon, who secured that massive corporate merger, and to Finn, our future heir. My career as a working professional was never mentioned. My night shifts were met with cold disdain. They saw the uniform and the late hours as proof of my continued failure, not as the fierce effort of a mother saving her kids. I still don't understand why you have to shake drinks for strangers, Tiffany. You went to a decent college. It's rather degrading. My father once saw my stack of savings, mostly 20s. He didn't ask about my goal. He just said, "You're still so far from stable. It's a good thing you have us, isn't it?" They always minimize my progress and maximize my need for them. Their words were just fuel. I kept smiling, but inside I was cementing my departure. The favoritism wasn't just about me, it stained my children. For Raven's 7th birthday, they gifted her a cheap, used puzzle. 2 weeks later, my mother spent an hour showing off the hand-stitched Italian cashmere blanket she bought for the unborn Finn. Raven needed new glasses. When I asked my father to help cover the cost, he sighed. Another expense. Yet, the conversation immediately shifted to the cost of Gideon's new luxury baby stroller. Their needs were ignored and minimized while every whim of the golden child was prioritized. The worst part? The kids started understanding. Willow stopped asking her grandparents for stories. Raven asked me one morning, "Mom, are we not important here?" Hearing that quiet question was more painful than any insult thrown at me. I learned quickly to put up a shield of silence. When they criticized my clothes, my job, or my mothering, I just nodded. My true emotions, the protective fury, the deep hurt, were locked away. I couldn't afford a fight. I needed to save the money, not the relationship. Every cent I earned went directly into my financial fortress. I had a spreadsheet, an exit calendar, and a goal that never left my sight. The revenge wouldn't be dramatic, it would be logistical. It would be the day I handed them the key and said nothing at all. I looked at Raven and Willow, who were already learning the hard lesson of conditional love. I promised them a home where every corner was theirs, where their drawings would be hung proudly, and where their presence was the only validation needed. I was building a life, not running away. And that life started with unshakable, quiet determination. When Finn arrived, it wasn't just a baby, it was a tsunami of attention. My parents completely forgot Raven had a school play the same week. The house became a shrine to the golden grandson. Our existence was now an inconvenience to their celebration. Before Finn, my mother occasionally watched the girls so I could pick up extra shifts. Now, I can't possibly take Raven to practice, Tiffany. Finn needs his quiet time, and I need to prepare for Gideon's visit. My lifelines were cut. The gift disparity was insulting. Raven got a dollar store coloring book. Finn received a sterling silver rattle engraved with his initials. My parents had no concept of tact. They made no effort to hide the fact that one grandchild was valued immensely, and the others, barely. They repainted Finn's nursery, formerly Willow's room, in lavender grandeur. That lavender wall felt like a physical representation of the boundary they had placed between us and them. Every canceled ride, every cheap toy, every excessive praise for Finn was a deposit into my motivation bank. The end of my 18-month timeline suddenly felt too far away. I needed to move faster. Raven, my budding artist, was chosen for a school exhibit. She showed her grandfather the invitation, beaming. He barely glanced at it. "That's lovely, dear. But we'll be at Gideon's place helping with Finn's registry that day. Maybe next year?" Willow, who simply laughs too loudly, was constantly policed. My mother would snap, "Willow, lower your voice. Finn is sleeping. You must remember that this house revolves around the baby's schedule now." My children were forced to shrink their personalities to accommodate a person they hadn't even met. I came home one day and saw my mother replacing a college of Raven's summer camp photos with a framed ultrasound image of Finn. This wasn't just physical displacement, it was the erasing of their history within the family's narrative. My girls were being told they didn't count. The first didn't shout. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest, pure protective rage. That anger became my engine. They could hurt me, but they would never hurt my daughters again. Raven stopped drawing. My little artist, whose imagination used to fill notebooks, now spent her afternoons staring at a blank wall. She had internalized the message. Her creativity wasn't worthy of space or attention. That silence was the most painful sound in the house. Willow, my loud, joyful firecracker, began to whisper. Every laugh was muffled, every step was cautious. She was terrified of disturbing the sacred quiet required for the real grandchild. My children were learning that their natural state of being was a burden. I could feel the invisible bruises. The constant, low-level emotional neglect was crushing their spirits far faster than I had anticipated. This was no longer an inconvenience for me. It was child abuse wrapped in silk. My escape plan wasn't fast enough. I tried to address it. "Mom, you need to acknowledge Raven's exhibit. You're hurting her." She merely waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be dramatic, Tiffany. Children are resilient. Gideon and his wife need my help right now." That night, I realized the cold, hard truth. My parents weren't just favoring Gideon, they resented my independence. My divorce proved I wasn't the perfect daughter they controlled. They used my children's pain as leverage to force me back into line. They wanted me to beg. They wanted me to admit I needed them. Instead, I worked harder, closing shifts and hoarding tips. My savings account wasn't just money, it was the currency of defiance. It was the countdown clock to their irrelevance. I stopped planning my revenge around their financial loss and started planning it around my children's healing. I swore to Raven and Willow, I will give you a home where you are the center of the universe, not just the background noise. I was close, so close. All the emotional pain, the public humiliation, the canceled play, it was all condensed into a few more weeks of waiting. The breaking point was already forming, not in an explosive burst, but in the slow, inevitable tightening of my resolve. I smiled when I heard them discussing the elaborate nursery setup. They had no idea they were preparing the setting for their ultimate defeat. The luxury of Laurelhurst turned into a prison. The constant, low-grade hostility meant Raven, Willow, and I lived our lives in a 400-square-foot bubble. We ate alone, whispered our stories, and treated the common areas like dangerous zones. The isolation was profound. I finally understood their love was a conditional contract. They valued obedience and status, not resilience or heart. My failure to stay married and rich was an intolerable breach of contract. Gideon's success, however, guaranteed his lineage the throne. My mother's cruelty wasn't loud, it was surgical. She'd talk about Finn's Ivy League potential while I was making Willow a sandwich. She didn't have to shout to hurt me. She just had to be excessively kind and lavish to the people I wasn't. I witnessed my children suffering from emotional starvation. They withdrew, accepting the silence as their fate. That sight, my girls making themselves small, was the absolute end of any lingering hope for reconciliation. The cord had to be severed. I was 3 weeks away from my initial saving goal. 3 weeks too long. The universe apparently agreed. I started sleeping less and working more, driven by a primal need to protect my territory before they destroyed what little was left of my daughter's self-worth. They didn't see Raven and Willow as individuals, they were just obstacles to Gideon's perfect narrative. My mother once referred to Raven as the noisy one to a neighbor. That's all she was, an adjective that interfered with the house's tranquility. I began preparing for the breach. Small boxes, tape, permanent markers, all hidden in the trunk of my car. My parents had meticulously planned Finn's grand entrance. I was meticulously planning my children's silent, permanent exit. They thought they held all the power because they held the deed to the house. They failed to realize I held the keys to our collective future. I was no longer seeking reconciliation, I was seeking absolute, unyielding independence. The final blow was coming sooner than expected. I was 3 shifts from hitting my savings goal. The restaurant closed early that Tuesday, a gift. I drove home, planning a surprise movie night with the girls. The moment I walked in, the air felt wrong. Too quiet. A deep, unsettling silence hung over the house. I heard a heavy dragging sound from the hallway upstairs, a muffled scraping. I moved toward the stairs, my heart suddenly pounding. Then came my mother's voice, unnecessarily loud, "Don't scratch the paint, dear. We need that room immaculate for little Finn." I saw them. My father was hauling Raven's tiny bed frame. My mother was carrying a box labeled Willow's toys toward the dark basement door. The betrayal was so sudden, so physical. They were actively erasing my daughters from the space we had paid to occupy with our silence. My father saw me, but instead of surprise, there was only self-righteousness. He said, unapologetically, "Oh, Tiffany, you're home early. We decided Finn needs his room now." It was never really your children's room, was it? I didn't feel hurt anymore. I felt violated. They had crossed the sacred boundary of my children's sense of security for a newborn they hadn't even met. That was the tipping point. The humiliation was fine, the threat to my daughter's well-being was not. My mother, smiling coldly, gestured downstairs. "The basement is perfectly adequate for temporary storage, Tiffany. Just make sure the girls keep their noise level down." She didn't offer a compromise. She offered an ultimatum, wrapped in the poisonous ribbon of their conditional love. The noise in my head stopped. The frantic thoughts, the financial worries all vanished. All that remained was a single, crystal-clear mission. They must never have another opportunity to look down on my daughters again. I didn't say a word. To argue would be to grant them dignity. I just walked past them, not toward the basement, but toward my girls. I knew this was their final, catastrophic mistake. They thought they had secured their grandson's comfort. They had only secured their own downfall. My savings were close enough. Their action had bought me the necessary time and motivation. The game was over. They had declared war on my family, and I was ready to deliver the definitive, silent victory. They were probably celebrating their minor victory in the kitchen, oblivious to the fact that I was about to execute the end of their reign. This wasn't just moving. This was a reclamation of sovereignty. I found my children in tears. Their displacement was complete. I found them huddled on their small, displaced beds. Raven was rocking Willow, both silent except for the desperate, gasping breaths of a child trying not to cry. This wasn't just sadness, this was shame. The crushing shame of being told you are less than nothing in your own home. Raven looked up at me, tears streaming. "Mama, why did Grandpa take my books? Are we going to live in the basement now?" Her innocent question was the final spike. It wasn't about the room, it was about the conditional existence they had been forced into. I held them tight, my own rage simmering. "No, baby, we are not living in the basement. We are leaving. We are leaving tonight." Their tiny gasps of relief were the only sound that mattered. Their pain was the last nail in the coffin of my relationship with my parents. I looked into my daughter's eyes. I wasn't just promising them a rental apartment, I was promising them sovereignty. I promised them a home where no one, not even their grandparents, could ever tell them they were too loud, or too much, or not good enough. I pulled out the hidden boxes and started packing. No time for sentimentality, only efficiency. Every folded blanket, every taped box was a tangible rejection of the life my parents had deemed worthy of me. I made 2 quick calls, one to the moving company I had secretly booked, and one to confirm the apartment lease starting tomorrow. My $10,000 safety net was intact. My children's freedom was secured. They had moved the kids' things, I was moving the entire family. I could hear my parents laughing downstairs, probably discussing the high-end Italian crib they'd ordered for Finn's pristine new room. Their happiness was built on my family's subjugation. The sheer grandeur of their lie, their love for the idea of family made my stomach turn. We moved quietly. Every step was deliberate, silent. I made sure we didn't wake my parents. The whole point was to leave without providing them the satisfaction of a fight, without giving them a chance to guilt-trip me. The moving truck arrived discreetly. The movers knew the drill, fast, quiet, and absolutely no questions asked. We loaded the few possessions we had with a speed born of pure desperation and protective fury. Freedom was not loud, it was efficient. I got in the cab with my girls. Raven was already smiling, clutching a drawing. I took one last, cold look at the house. That house wasn't a home, it was a monument to their ego. And I was leaving them to their golden delusion. The real revenge had just begun. I didn't just pack our things, I eradicated our presence. I stripped the beds, vacuumed the carpets, and wiped down every surface. When I was done, the room was impersonal, ready for the next perfect guest. It was the courtesy they demanded, and the final courtesy I would grant them. I left a note on the kitchen counter, next to the elaborate nursery planning calendar. It was short, polite, and absolute. "We've moved out. The rent has stopped. Enjoy the space." No explanation, no drama, just finality. My mother had proudly told me that Gideon's wife was too delicate to drive herself to prenatal appointments. That meant my father, who hated city driving, was scheduled for 3 appointments this week, appointments I used to cover. I walked back into the silent house one last time, not to gloat, but for a single, necessary task, the delivery of their last great gift. It was a small, well-wrapped box I collected discreetly from the basement earlier, filled with things I hadn't unpacked. I went straight to the untouched nursery Finn's room, now ready for its royal inhabitant. The air smelled of fresh paint and expensive new linens. I set the box in the middle of the Italian crib. It was addressed simply, for Finn. They wanted the focus to be on him. I gave it to them. Inside the box wasn't a silver rattle. It was a single, used coloring book, a broken plastic tea set from Willow, and a small, faded drawing by Raven. The things they considered junk were now the only gifts from the family they rejected that would ever grace their golden grandchild's room. I locked the door and dropped the key into their mailbox. The action was simple, but the meaning was monumental. I drove away with my daughters, not looking back. There was no argument, no shouting, just a clean, surgical cut from their toxicity. We drove straight to our new apartment. The moment Raven and Willow ran through the door, laughing, I felt a flood of relief. This was the victory, two little girls finally feeling safe and unconditionally loved. The financial independence was merely the tool. This was the reward. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of missed calls from my parents. I smiled and muted my phone. They had discovered the note, the clean rooms, and the profound, absolute emptiness where my obedience used to be. We had nothing but boxes, but we had everything. We had a home defined by acceptance, not expectation. My revenge wasn't in the objects I left behind. It was in the freedom I took with me. We were finally, gloriously home. The first morning in our new home was silent, blessed. The girls were sleeping soundly, something they hadn't done in 18 months. I sat on a moving box, drinking lukewarm coffee, and watched the sunrise. This peace was worth every grueling night shift. My phone was a frantic mess. 15 missed calls, a barrage of texts demanding an immediate return. One text from my mother, "You've ruined the whole schedule. Who's taking Gideon's wife to her appointment? Call back." And oh, do. Their panic confirmed my victory. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about their inconvenience. I didn't engage. I opened their contacts and tapped block. It was a tiny digital action, but it felt like dismantling a decades-old wall. Next, the financial cleanse. They had insisted on being secondary signers on an old savings account just in case. I called the bank and removed them immediately. Their control was predicated on money and access. I was shutting down both. Raven and Willow woke up, not with a whisper, but with a peal of laughter. They were exploring the empty living room, unboxed and unafraid. Willow started stamping her feet just because she could. The sound was wonderful. This was the home I had worked 18 months to purchase. My revenge wasn't loud or destructive. It was the quiet, calculated subtraction of myself and my daughters from their toxic ecosystem. They would have the perfect, immaculate nursery for their golden grandson, but they would have no chauffeur, no financial backup, and no control. Gideon called, panicked. "Tiffany, Dad is losing it. Mom says you left a note about the rent. What the hell is going on with the appointments?" I kept my voice flat, emotionless. I moved out. "You now have the full attention and full responsibilities of the family." He tried to launch into a lecture about family. I cut him off. "I've started my own family, Gideon, one based on love, not ledger books. I don't call this number again." I blocked him too. The final tie to that house, that family, and that toxic narrative was gone. I looked at my girls. The future was unwritten, but it was ours. We were financially independent, emotionally free, and physically safe. The whole family revenge story wasn't about the note or the gifts. It was about this, the moment my daughters realized they were finally home. Days turned into weeks. The frantic calls from my parents stopped, replaced by a deep, beautiful silence. They eventually understood their tactics wouldn't work anymore. The well of my obedience had run dry, and they had no leverage left. I watched Willow draw one afternoon. She was singing at the top of her lungs. a sound that would have earned a severe reprimand back at Laurelhurst. That moment her unfiltered, joyful noise was worth more than any Italian cashmere blanket or silver rattle they could buy. Raven started drawing again, not quietly in a corner, but on a huge, bright canvas I bought her. She hung her first new piece right in the middle of our living room wall. It was a picture of the three of us, holding hands. I knew my parents were paying their own quiet price. My father now had to drive Gideon's wife to every appointment. His texts to Gideon were reportedly frantic about the traffic and the inconvenience. The golden grandson was proving to be a golden burden. My mother, desperate for help, offered to pay a neighbor to babysit. The neighbor quoted her a full daycare rate. The cost of the convenience they lost far exceeded the cheap rent I had been paying. Revenge is a dish best served logistically. They never missed me. They missed the service I provided, the errands I ran, and the buffer I created between them and reality. That realization was the sweetest part of the whole ordeal. I was finally an autonomous person, not just an extension of their needs. I looked at my reflection in the new apartment window and gave myself a small, satisfied nod. It wasn't a malicious grin, it was a defiant smile. I had protected my cubs and taken back our life with quiet, unwavering strength. Our new apartment was small, but it was filled with unconditional love and respect. We made decisions together. The girls now knew that their worth was inherent, not tied to someone else's conditional approval. Gideon finally texted me after 2 weeks, addressing only the gift. The text read, "Mom says thank you for the old toys you left for Finn." It's a very sweet thought, but we threw them out. I smiled. Their inability to recognize the symbolism, their need to destroy any trace of my children was perfect. They were still stuck in the past, measuring worth by price tags. I was free, measuring worth by the sound of my daughter's laughter. The ultimate revenge wasn't in their immediate panic. It was in the long-term plan, living a successful life they couldn't touch. I was going back to school. I was saving for a house of our own. I was building a legacy of self-reliance. They got the immaculate nursery they always wanted. It was perfect, sanitized, and dedicated entirely to the golden child. The tragic irony? It was filled with nothing but their own echoes and the hollow absence of the family they had pushed away. The only thing left of me in that house was the note on the counter, a quiet statement of fact. They could shred it, burn it, or frame it, it didn't matter. The decision was made, the deed was done, and the door was permanently locked. We unboxed our lives not with sadness for what we lost, but with excitement for what we were building. Every picture hung, every book placed on the shelf, was a brick in the foundation of a home built on unconditional love. My parents wanted a perfect family photo of Gideon, his wife, and Finn. I had something better. I had a life where my daughters smiled because they were genuinely happy, not because they were performing for their grandparents. The biggest impact wasn't the lost rent. It was the irreplaceable loss of access to my life and the lives of my children. They had lost their chauffeur, their cleaner, and their emotional punching bag. I had gained the world. I tucked them into their beds. The last thing they asked was, "Will we ever have to whisper again, Mama?" I kissed their foreheads and said, "Never. You can be as loud and as big as you want to be. This is your home." The revenge was complete. It was beautiful, it was silent, and it gave my children back their voices. Now, it was time to build our future. Unpacking was less of a chore and more of a celebration of sovereignty. Every box opened felt like a victory over the silence we'd been forced to keep. The apartment wasn't grand, but it was ours, and it was filled with unconditional air. We could finally just be. I watched Raven draw on the floor while Willow ran circles around her, laughing. Neither of them flinched when the doorbell rang. That was the difference, the absence of toxic vigilance. They no longer expected to be punished for simply existing in a space. After a week of silence, my mother finally broke. Her text wasn't apologetic, it was manipulative, asking for a favor. The moving truck scratched the floor of Finn's room. "Can you ask the company you used for a refund?" "I'm too upset to deal with it." I didn't respond. The silence was my answer. My job as their personal assistant, chauffeur, and emotional buffer was officially retired. The only way to maintain my hard-won peace was to enforce absolute, zero-contact boundaries. They had to learn to solve their own problems. My focus shifted completely. It wasn't on their next call or their next manipulation, it was on the textbooks I'd bought. I was back to school studying for my future, a future built on my own merit, not their inheritance. That felt like the truest victory of all. I found Raven and Willow asleep on the sofa, tangled up with their favorite threadbare blankets. I kissed their foreheads and made a silent, ironclad promise. Never again would I let anyone, especially the people who called themselves family, dim their light or question their worth. I finally understood that family isn't blood, it's behavior. My parents had the blood, but they behaved like landlords. Our little unit, built on shared secrets, hard work, and unconditional acceptance, was the only true family I had ever known. My new job was demanding, but seeing that bank balance grow was a different kind of fulfillment. Every dollar earned was a shield against their future attempts at control. Financial independence is the ultimate power in a transactional family. Raven, once the noisy one, had found her voice again. She was asking questions in class and making friends. The shame that used to weigh on her shoulders had lifted. She now knew that her thoughts and ideas were valuable, not burdens. Willow, who used to freeze up when my parents walked by, now ran through the apartment like it was her own personal kingdom. She was playing make-believe without glancing over her shoulder. Her nervous tics were gone. The healing was visible, palpable. Gideon, now the sole focus of our parents' attention, was crumbling under the pressure. He texted me, venting about the sheer exhaustion of accommodating Mom and Dad's demands for Finn's perfect life. I simply deleted it. Without me, the full weight of their self-absorption landed squarely on Gideon's shoulders. It wasn't revenge, it was natural consequences. The biggest shift was my mindset. I stopped planning escape and started planning a foundation. Education, better housing, and a retirement fund that didn't rely on my father's whims. My future was now a straight, clear path. The woman looking back at me in the mirror was different. She wasn't fearful or apologetic. She was strong, tired, but undeniably in control. I finally respected myself enough to protect my children from the family name. I vow to you, my darlings, that the price of freedom is the only price we will ever pay. And it was cheap. I knew this was the moment my daughter's legacy changed. Not because of money, but because of unconditional love and fierce protection. Back at Laurelhurst, Finn's nursery was probably still pristine, untouched, and utterly cold. Our home was noisy, messy, and filled with old furniture. It was imperfect, which meant it was finally perfectly real. I spent an evening archiving and deleting all the old emails, the demands, the criticisms, the thinly veiled insults. It was a digital burial of the past. The chapter of Tiffany Thompson, obligated daughter, was closed. I changed my bio on social media, not just single mother, but student, entrepreneur, and protector of the vow. My identity was no longer defined by my parents' expectations, but by my own unyielding commitment to my children's happiness. They had exchanged my essential service for a temporary moment of satisfaction. The trade was catastrophic for them and utterly liberating for us. The true revenge was the quiet knowledge that they would spend the rest of their lives wondering how to get back what they threw away. So, what's the final lesson in a story about family revenge? It's not about the money, the rent, or even the perfect nursery. It's about recognizing the true cost of conditional love and choosing self-rescue over continued subjugation. My parents didn't need a daughter, they needed an employee. And I had accepted that job for years out of a false sense of obligation. The final betrayal was a gift because it showed me that their love was merely payment for my service. I left silently because there was nothing left to say. When dealing with toxic people, the most powerful words are often the ones you don't use. My exit wasn't a tantrum, it was a contractual termination. I revoked their access to my life and my children's peace. Look at my daughters now, no longer flinching at loud noises or whispering in corners. That is the true measure of success. Their laughter is the only metric that matters, and it is a metric my parents can no longer influence. I am teaching my girls that their biggest inheritance won't be money or property, but resilience and self-respect. They watched me take back my life, and that is a lesson of fierce, protective love that will stay with them forever. Gideon has finally realized that the title of Golden Child comes with a crippling price tag, lifetime servitude. I don't gloat, but I do note the irony. They got the perfect son and the perfect grandson. They just lost the only person willing to clean up the mess. If you are stuck in a similar cycle, if your worth is being measured by your utility, ask yourself this: what are you truly protecting? Your children's peace or your own false sense of security in a crumbling foundation? The answer is your path forward. My revenge was securing a home where love is the only currency and acceptance is the only rule. We don't have marble floors or an Italian crib, but we have unconditional freedom. And that, my friends, is priceless. My life isn't a revenge story anymore. It's a success story. It's a story about a single mom who bet on herself and won. Our new routine wasn't easy early mornings, late night study sessions, but it was ours. And it was built on a stable foundation. There was no whispering, no frantic cleaning, just the sound of Willow arguing over pancakes and Raven doing her homework. The first time I paid the rent entirely on my own, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated pride. No hidden favors, no implied debt, just a clean transactional exchange for the right to unconditional space. I noticed the physical change in my girls. Raven stopped checking the corners of rooms. Willow started running without apology. The trauma of being told they were too much was being slowly replaced by the truth they were exactly enough. I realized the best thing I could give them wasn't stability, it was the lesson of self-worth. No matter what life throws at them, they'll know that they are never truly trapped if they can bet on their own abilities. My parents were still obsessed with appearances. They were throwing money at Finn's future while losing the actual legacy. Their legacy wasn't the house or the money, it was the unconditional connection I had severed. They valued gold, I chose family. The ultimate revenge wasn't leaving. It was the perfect indifference to their subsequent panic and attempts to reach out. I was living my best life, and that was the one thing they couldn't control, couldn't buy, and couldn't diminish. I changed the locks on the new apartment the first day. The physical act of turning that key was incredibly profound. This door was the threshold of our new life. It locked out toxicity and locked in unconditional peace. One evening we took a photo, just the three of us, messy, tired, and gloriously happy. It was the real Thompson family portrait. No gilded frames, just three faces radiating the simple, hard-won joy of being truly free. This wasn't the end of the journey, it was the powerful beginning. The revenge was a catalyst, but the life is the reward. My story is a testament to the fact that you can always choose your own path, even when others try to pave it in gold. I often wonder how my parents are doing. Then I look at my girls, and the thought vanishes. Their drama is no longer my reality. I cross the threshold into a life where I am the author, and every day is a blessed, unscripted victory. If you have to choose between gold and freedom, always choose freedom. You can buy your own gold later. The last hour in that house felt unnaturally quiet. I moved with a surgical calm, wrapping up the remnants of our 18-month debt. Every action was measured, calculated. There was no room for sentimentality, only for strategic execution. I swept the room one last time, not for emotional closure, but to ensure I left absolutely zero personal leverage behind. No forgotten hair tie, no childhood drawing. Just perfect, impersonal emptiness. The room was ready for their next obsession. This was the essential part of the plan, the gift of sovereignty I placed in the middle of Finn's custom crib. The box contained the forgotten treasures of the granddaughters they rejected, now symbolically replacing the grandson they idolized. It was pristine, expensive, and utterly soulless. It smelled like ambition and new money. I thought about how much I loved my messy, loud girls. My parents could buy perfection, but they could never buy true connection. I placed the note next to the planning calendar, a document symbolizing all the service they expected. The note was the contract termination. We've moved out. The rent has stopped. Enjoy the space. No drama, just factual, absolute finality. I closed the door on 32 years of obligation. The sound of the lock clicking wasn't a lament. It was a symphony of liberation. I tossed the key into the mailbox. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was severing the last physical tether to their control. My girls were already belted in, their faces lit up by the streetlights. They were excited, not scared. That was the final sign. My fear had been replaced by their unconditional trust. I was driving toward their peace. I did not look in the rearview mirror. Not once. That house, that life was no longer relevant to my trajectory. We were moving forward. The finality was absolute, clean, surgical, and complete. The family revenge story was over. Arriving at the new apartment, the girls ran inside immediately, not asking for permission, just claiming the space. Their laughter echoed, loud and unrestrained. That sound, that pure, unapologetic joy, was the ultimate payoff. I knew the calls would start soon. When the note was discovered, I muted my phone and charged it on the highest shelf. Their panic was coming, but it would happen in silence, without my participation. I was finally an audience member, not an actor. Gideon was now officially the only adult child available to drive, clean, and manage the Laurelhurst drama. He'd wanted the title of Golden Child. He now got the golden responsibilities. That was the elegant simplicity of my exit strategy. The apartment smelled of cheap paint and cardboard, but it was permeated with something far more valuable, our own peace. This wasn't a temporary stop. This was the first brick laid in the foundation of a life where we mattered most. I watched them sleep, their little bodies finally relaxed, unburdened by the expectation of perfection. My only job now was to be their unyielding protector and the architect of their future, not the servant of my past. The script of my life had been written by my parents for too long. Now the pages were blank, and the pen was mine. I started writing the first line of my new chapter, Chapter 1, The Thompson Family, the real one. The most surprising feeling, the total absence of guilt. They had spent years trying to manufacture it, but I felt none. Guilt is a tool of the manipulator. Once you sever the connection, the tool loses its power. I was simply correcting a mistake. They would eventually find a way to reach me, but I was ready. I already had my answer planned. It wouldn't be dramatic or emotional. It would be a simple, professional statement: I have no service to offer you. I left one old, worn key, the key to the side entrance on a street corner near the house, just to be thorough. It was a small ceremonial act. I was shedding every layer of my former life. I was officially a freelancer in my own destiny. The sun rose on my first morning of absolute, unconditional independence. The air tasted sweeter, the coffee hotter. I hadn't just settled a score, I had created a life. The true triumph was the defiant peace I felt in my new home. My family is defined by the three of us, our laughter, and the shared struggle for freedom. We crossed the threshold, not into poverty, but into boundless opportunity. This is where our story truly begins. If you're stuck in a toxic family dynamic, remember, you don't need their permission to be free. The rent for your soul is too high. Pay it to yourself. The only inheritance that matters is the one you build for your children, a legacy of self-respect and unconditional love. That is the final clarity. We had a spontaneous picnic on the living room floor one rainy afternoon. No silverware, just cheap pizza and pure, unstructured fun. Back at Laurelhurst, every meal was a performance. Here, our messy freedom was the main course. I was struggling with an economics concept when Raven walked in and started reading her novel out loud. I didn't tell her to whisper. I just studied to the soundtrack of her confident voice. That was the new normalcy. Gideon reached out with a small favor request. Could I recommend a babysitter? My reply was one word, no. Simple, clean, final. I didn't offer a reason or an apology. That one word felt like a mountain of liberation. Willow taped her first abstract, colorful scribble to our refrigerator door. It was a masterpiece of imperfection. At Laurelhurst, only framed, expensive, adult-approved art was allowed. Here, her mess was celebrated. I still woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, expecting the silence to be broken by a parent's angry whisper. But there was nothing, just the sound of the city and the deep, unburdened breathing of my daughters. The peace was real. Every small choice felt monumental. Choosing which brand of cereal, which park to visit, which bedtime we decided on. My parents dictated my life, even my groceries. Now, the power of simple, daily autonomy was my greatest luxury. I started making friends, real friends at my community college. People who saw me, not my inheritance or my parents' position. We built a small community of single moms supporting each other. That genuine connection was worth more than every black tie gala. I heard a rumor that my father had to teach Gideon how to load the dishwasher. The man who owned $1 million company couldn't figure out basic housework, because I always did it. The price of convenience was now paid in labor. They attempted to send a certified letter. I signed for it, looked at the logo, and tossed it. My life isn't a negotiating table. It's a closed-door policy. They could mail their guilt, but it was null and void on arrival. Every small choice, every unprompted laugh, every no I say, is a small victory. Don't underestimate the power of those tiny wins. They aren't just moments, they are the bricks you lay for your unconditional home. That is the ultimate revenge. The biggest change wasn't the address or the bank account. It was the woman staring back at me in the cheap mirror. She was tired, but the fear was gone. She was built from scratch, and that foundation was stronger than any inheritance. Finishing my degree was a moment of pure, unadulterated self-respect. No one could ever take that education away from me. My parents had valued money, I had chosen merit. The paper diploma felt heavier, more valuable than the deed to their house. Raven joined the debate club. Willow, once terrified of making a choice, now chooses her own mismatched, brightly colored clothes. They are learning to take up space. That confidence, that is the most precious inheritance I could ever give them. My father called once. I watched the screen light up Dad. The simple name held zero power over me now. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. I then permanently blocked the number. The silence that followed was sacred. Therapy wasn't about justifying my revenge. It was about undoing the years of emotional conditioning. I learned to identify the guilt they had manufactured and how to reject it. I was finally healing the invisible wounds they left. I learned to fix things, not just broken pieces of furniture, but broken systems. I never again wanted to depend on a man or my parents' money to solve a practical problem. Self-reliance is the new currency. Gideon started posting cryptic, exhausted status updates about unreasonable demands and toxic obligation. He's now living the life I used to dread. I hope he finds his own exit, but I won't be his stepping stone. I opened a retirement account. It's not much, but it's a statement I am planning my own future. My retirement fund is built on my work, not on a promise from my father's eventual will. That security is irreplaceable. Our apartment is small, but it's always full of sunlight and laughter. It's a home where children can be loud and free. This space, bought with my labor and defined by my love, is the perfect, unconditional sanctuary. People ask if I regret the revenge. My answer is always no. It wasn't revenge, it was radical self-protection. I simply removed my valuable services and watched the consequences take hold. That is not malice, that is accountability. I stopped living the script written for me. I tore up their family narrative and started writing my own manifesto of freedom. This is the true power, to be the sole author of your own destiny, with no editors or co-signers. I still carry the Thompson name, but it no longer carries the weight of their expectations. The name is mine now. It belongs to the woman who rescued her children and built a life on courage, not coercion. I heard that Finn's new nanny quit after 2 weeks. Gideon is learning the true value of my free labor. They are all finding out that the money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy loyalty, peace, or unconditional service. Never let anyone, especially family, weaponize your guilt. Guilt is the chain of the manipulator. Recognize the chain, sever the link, and walk into the blinding light of your unapologetic freedom. We started our own traditions, messy, loud, full of mistakes, and completely ours. No more mandatory perfection, just 3 people baking a slightly burnt cake and calling it a masterpiece. The greatest victory isn't getting back at them, it's realizing that they no longer matter. My emotional detachment is the definitive ending to their story. I close the book on the Thompson drama. If you're planning your exit, make it clean, make it strategic, and make it about your peace, not their pain. True revenge is living well without them and without having to justify your own existence to anyone. I sometimes feel pity for my parents and Gideon. They are still trapped in the marble cage, defined by their own rules. Their perfect life is their prison. My imperfect life is my unconditional freedom. I wouldn't trade it for all the money in the world. 6 months. That's how long it took for the emotional shockwaves to subside and for a new, genuine quiet to settle over our lives. I was tending to my balcony garden, something my mother would have found dreadfully working class. I occasionally saw snippets of their world. Gideon's social media posts grew less glossy, more strained. He was trying to maintain the facade, but the cracks were showing. Their drama was now playing out on a public stage, without my help. An old Laurelhurst acquaintance messaged me with concern, but really it was just gossip. They wanted details about the shameful estrangement. I replied with 3 words, I wish them well. Then I blocked her. My parents hired a personal assistant to replace my logistical work. The cost was astronomical. My service had been free. Now, every item I used to manage was a line item on a budget sheet. The true price of their comfort. The perfect Thompson family narrative collapsed without its sacrificial lamb. The cracks were now too visible to ignore. They couldn't Photoshop me back into their lives, and the truth of their dysfunction was finally exposed to the light. Detachment is not coldness, it is radical self-care. I let go of the obligation to care about their problems. Their chaos could no longer reach me. The old ties were officially cooled to absolute zero. The love in this small apartment is the opposite of the love I knew growing up. It's unconditional, loud, and messy. We didn't earn this happiness through obedience, we claimed it through courage and self-definition. I learned that the old family was still talking about the box I left in the crib. The subtle message hit home. It was a monument to their rejection. A quiet, potent reminder of the daughters they discarded for a hypothetical heir. My absence eroded their sense of control. They realized that their money couldn't buy competence or dedication. The Thompson empire was built on my labor, not just my father's money. The foundation was rotten, and now it was shaking. We are a unit. 3 people bonded by shared sacrifice and unconditional acceptance. That bond cannot be bought, sold, or controlled by an outside party. It is our masterpiece. Freedom isn't the absence of struggle, it's the right to choose your struggle. I choose simple work over complex manipulation. I am now the one who sets the rules, who defines the boundaries, and who grants the access. My parents believed I fled into poverty. They can't comprehend that their luxury was the actual prison. They are trapped by the sheer weight of their expectations and possessions. I am weightless, floating on my own terms. I went into my phone and permanently deleted my mother's contact information. No more temptation to check, no old messages to reread. The very last thread of their access to my life was physically severed. My daily life now is blissfully boring. No drama, no high stakes, just the steady rhythm of raising happy kids. I traded the illusion of grandeur for the reality of peace. That is a transaction I will never regret. To anyone considering estrangement, it is the hardest thing you will ever do, but it is the ultimate act of self-respect. You are not abandoning them, you are finally choosing yourself. The ties that bind you should not strangle you. I no longer need their approval or fear their disapproval. They are simply irrelevant data. The greatest peace comes when you realize the people who once defined you can no longer even perceive you. The Thompson inheritance meant nothing compared to the legacy of courage I am giving my girls. I taught them that self-preservation is not selfish, it is the most sacred duty a mother has. My future is not written in their will, it is written in my work ethic and my new purpose. I build my future one small victory at a time, and every single step is taken with unconditional freedom. My new community was forged not through blood, but through shared ambition and instant acceptance. No one here cared about the Thompson name or their money. We talked about homework, bills, and tomorrow's potential. Willow, who used to whisper for fear of being too loud, had her first school play. She belted out her lines. That sound, her voice, unapologetically amplified, was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. The fear was gone. Raven used to wear only designer clothes, pre-approved by her grandmother. Now, she chose a $10 t-shirt with a ridiculous slogan. That t-shirt was the uniform of her new identity. She valued comfort and self-expression over the burden of culture. The first holiday without Laurelhurst was magical. No politics, no forced smiles, no measuring up. We celebrated our own way, with burnt cookies and unconditional acceptance. The silence was the greatest gift. My mother tried one last, aggressive email disguised as concern for the girls. I read the first line, all manipulation, and deleted it. The boundary is not just physical, it is a steel emotional barrier. We are still Thompsons, but the name now belongs to the woman who chose to define it, not the one who inherited it. Our new identity is built on courage and independence, not status. That is the only legacy I recognize. I heard a rumor my father called the police after 2 months, claiming we were missing and endangered. He couldn't grasp that we were simply safe and disconnected. Their inability to control us became their official panic. The day my first full paycheck hit my account, it felt more powerful than any $1 million deposit they'd offered. That money was clean. It was mine. It represented self-worth, not servitude. I bought the girls new sneakers with it. Success isn't defined by the size of your house. It's defined by your ability to serve your own community. My new peers relied on my knowledge. That sense of genuine value was the greatest status symbol I could ever achieve. They can never touch this piece. It's built on autonomy, not on their shaky, conditional love. I found my ground. I found my footing. I found my unshakable, uncomplicated happiness. I noticed a small article about a decline in the Thompson Company's productivity. Gideon, the golden child, was now failing to manage the empire I ran for free. The true weight of the golden cage. My love for my girls is the most powerful force in my life. It is not tied to performance or approval. It's just there, solid, fierce, and entirely mine to give. That's the greatest treasure I built. Our new ritual is reading together before bed, about heroes who fought dragons, not ones who built empires. We are cultivating a love for courage, resilience, and adventure. Was it revenge? Yes, but not the kind involving malice or destruction. It was the revenge of claiming my own value. I took away the prize they cherished most, my unpaid, unquestioning service. That's the ultimate, beautiful retaliation. Don't let money be the chain. The moment I realized my time was more valuable than their wealth, I was truly free. The golden cage is still a cage. Your self-worth is the key that unlocks that lock, regardless of the price tag. Their greatest fear wasn't my anger, it was my silence. They thrive on reaction and drama. My refusal to engage, my emotional indifference, that's the ultimate, untraceable weapon. Use your silence wisely. Remember the unwritten rule. Your primary duty is to protect your peace and the peace of your children. No family loyalty, no obligation supersedes that rule. You are the only one responsible for your sanctuary. The Thompson family story ended not in a blaze of glory, but in my quiet, profound victory. Go find your own peace. Cut the cords. Your life is your masterpiece. Thank you for sticking with my story. If you're trapped in a similar gilded cage, this isn't just entertainment. It's a roadmap. Your silence is their power. Your freedom starts with one unapologetic decision. Lesson 1. Define your value. Don't let your family's financial or social standing determine your worth. Your labor, your emotional bandwidth, your time, these are assets. Charge them fairly, or, better yet, take them back. Lesson 2. Master the power of no. The word no is a full sentence. It requires no apology, no explanation, and no compromise. Use it as the first line of defense for your peace and boundaries. It is the strongest word in your vocabulary. Lesson 3. Shred the myth of obligation. You do not owe anyone your happiness or your trauma for their comfort. Toxic family loyalty is a cage. Your true loyalty should always be to your well-being and self-preservation. Lesson 4. Build your own support system. Replace blood ties with chosen family. They are the people who see you, not your status. Surround yourself with love that is unconditional and freely given. That community is your ultimate safety net. Lesson 5. Peace is the ultimate win. The best revenge is not destruction or loud confrontation, it's quiet, unshakable peace. They can't attack your peace if they can't reach your heart. Guard it fiercely. If my story resonated, you are not alone. Share your experience in the comments below. Let's build a community of survivors who chose courage over coercion. Drop an emoji that represents your freedom. If you want to follow more stories of self-reclamation and ultimate freedom, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into toxic family dynamics and sweet, clean exits. Go forth and be the author of your own narrative. Tear up their script. Write your own manifesto of joy. Your unconditional life starts now. Don't wait for permission. You are the protagonist here. Remember, the only person you have to save is yourself. And trust me, you are worth the rescue. Thank you for being here. I am Tiffany, and I will see you on the road to unapologetic freedom. Bye for now.